You look like you wandered in from a tax office by mistake. The young heir scoffed, his lip curling at my charcoal wool suit as though I'd arrived wearing a garbage bag instead of tailored menswear. I let the insult hang in the recycled air of the 40th floor boardroom until the two junior analysts by the window stopped fidgeting with their pens and turned to watch what would happen next. It was 7:15 on a foggy Tuesday morning in downtown Seattle, and I was standing above a city still shrugging off its coffee and drain haze, while a $600 million merger teetered on the edge of collapse just one floor below the clouds. The conference room smelled of stale espresso and the specific, metallic tension that only arrives an hour before a company's future gets decided by people who barely know its name. I had spent 22 years working my way up from a cramped cubicle doing payroll reconciliations to becoming the woman companies called when their finances stopped telling a story anyone wanted to hear. My name is Renata Cole, and that morning I held the title of Chief Financial Architect at Bellwood Dynamics, though from the way the founder's son addressed me, you'd have guessed I was there to refill the water pitchers. Julian Bellwood wore a slate blue Italian suit better suited to a rooftop cocktail party than a room about to host institutional investors, having inherited his father's company, along with a business degree that everyone quietly suspected his tutors had earned for him. "Your presentation lacks soul, Renata," he said without glancing up from his phone, insisting that their guest investor responded to passion, not spreadsheets, and waved a manicured hand at my entire presence as if swatting away a fly. "My numbers do the job your charisma can't, Julian," I answered, deliberately softening my voice, because a quiet tone forces a room to lean forward instead of tuning out entirely. Griffin Hangul, Comium Anus, Hangul, Ko Anus, Vale isn't crossing 3 time zones to admire your cufflinks, I continued. He's here to decide whether his fund entrusts $300 million of pension money to this company, and pension money answers to balance sheets, never to charm. Julian exhaled dramatically, the practiced sigh of a man who had never once been told to sit down and listen, and informed me I was present strictly as a technical resource, in case the investor asked anything, in his words, too dull for him to bother explaining. I studied his performance of confidence, and recognized underneath it the particular flavor of panic that wealthy, untested men wear when they sense the walls closing in around their inheritance. Before we go further into what happened in that room, if stories about quiet competence outsmarting arrogance are the kind of thing that keeps you watching, consider subscribing, because it genuinely helps keep these stories coming. The door opened, and Desmond Bellwood swept in with the loose, oblivious confidence of a man who had coasted upward for 30 years without ever noticing the ground shifting beneath him. He clapped his son on the shoulder, praised his suit, and instructed the room that today was about vision and momentum, not the tedious ledger pages I had assembled across 5 sleepless weeks, and I felt a familiar cold settle into my chest as I remembered whose careful accounting had quietly saved this company after his disastrous real estate gamble 2 years prior. At 8 o'clock precisely, Griffin Vale entered without wasted movement, a composed man in his early 60s whose gray suit fit like it had been designed around his exact posture, his eyes scanning the room the way an inspector scans a bridge for hairline cracks. He declined the offered coffee, set a slim tablet on the table, and stated plainly that he had 1 hour and several sharp questions about the company's accounts receivable in its European subsidiary, prompting Julian to immediately launch into a glossy slideshow about what he called visionary brand energy, filled with gradient backgrounds and words like synergy and momentum that made Vale's expression harden into visible irritation. When Vale asked about the actual customer churn behind Julian's celebrated rebranding campaign, Julian faltered into vague talk about organic market shifts, and I finally spoke, stating clearly that churn had risen 14% since the campaign launched because its budget had been funded by gutting the customer support team by nearly a third. Julian's face went pale as his father shot me a glare sharp enough to cut glass, but Vale simply clicked his pen and asked me to continue, turning so completely away from Julian that the young man seemed to visibly deflate inside his expensive jacket, and 20 minutes later, after Julian admitted the company's core software platform was actually rented from a third-party vendor with no ownership stake at all. Desmond's phone lit up on the table with a message from his own number warning me that one more comment about compliance would end my employment by Friday. I read that message once, thought about my daughter's upcoming semester tuition, and the 22 years I had invested in keeping this company alive through storms its owners never even noticed, and then calmly told Griffin Vale the truth about the audit committee's chairman, a man who happened to be Desmond's fishing partner with no financial credentials whatsoever. Vale closed his tablet, regarded Desmond with an expression carved from stone, and said he valued honesty over showmanship far more than he valued polish, before rising and telling Desmond his fund would follow up, a phrase everyone in that room correctly understood to mean the deal was dead. Within the hour, security walked me out of the building I had spent 2 decades helping to build, carrying a small box of desk photos and a glass award, while a cold Seattle drizzle began to fall in a way that felt almost deliberately cruel. Standing soaked on the sidewalk without a job, my phone rang with an unfamiliar New York number, and when I answered, Griffin Vale's steady voice explained that he hadn't actually left the building at all. He had simply gone downstairs to purchase Bellwood Dynamics' overdue bridge loan directly from its lender before the ink on his exit had even dried. That single acquisition made him the company's primary creditor within minutes, meaning he now held leverage over the very ground Desmond and Julian stood on, and he asked me to return inside because, as he put it, our conversation upstairs was far from finished. The same guards who had escorted me out stepped aside the instant Vale said I was with him, because capital commands a respect that job titles alone rarely manage to earn. We rode the elevator up in unhurried silence, past a lobby full of stunned employees and a receptionist frozen mid-sentence, and walked into Desmond's office, where Julian sat slumped on the leather couch nursing a can of soda like a scolded teenager. Vale explained, with the measured calm of someone reading a weather report, that Desmond's default on his loan covenants meant the debt would now convert into equity, making Vale the majority shareholder, and that Desmond would be stepping down as chairman while Julian would be terminated for cause, effective that very afternoon. Then Vale turned to me and told the room he was appointing me interim chief executive officer, a sentence that landed like a thunderclap, and Julian, humiliated beyond words, could only mutter that I was nothing before storming out behind his crumbling father. The following Monday, I walked into that same corner office, now stripped of trophies and cologne, and settled behind a desk that finally felt like mine after 22 years spent building someone else's legacy instead of my own. In the top drawer, I found a handwritten note from Griffin Vale that read simply, "Competence never goes out of style," followed by a postscript instructing me to delete every slide that used the word synergy, and I laughed out loud for the first time in months as morning light spilled across the harbor view I had finally, truly earned. Please subscribe to our channel and share this video with your friends and family. We create entertaining and inspiring stories for our viewers, and your support helps us continue making great content for you.